Welcome to today's deep dive into the text, Ancient Truths for Modern Lives.
Glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, our mission today is to essentially act as your impartial guides through this material. We're exploring this really fascinating premise that even though our modern reality is defined by, smartphones, algorithms, and artificial intelligence, our foundational struggles remain completely untouched.
Right. The author makes a very compelling case that people still battle paralyzing fear. They still long for connection and desperately seek purpose, exactly as they did in ancient biblical narratives.
And we aren't endorsing any specific viewpoint here, just reporting on what the text argues. But the way they frame it is pretty striking.
It is. The author uses these ancient accounts basically as a psychological mirror. So instead of treating them merely as historical or theological artifacts, they're presented as highly practical blueprints.
Right.
The core argument is that the fears and doubts and triumphs of these historical figures, they map directly onto the very things you are dealing with right now.
Which means whether you are actively prepping for a high-stakes boardroom meeting today, or, you're just trying to manage the quiet, constant anxieties of paying rent and raising kids, this text suggests that ancient figures wrestled with those exact same fears.
Exactly.
So let's start right at the foundation of the human experience, according to the text, which is this overwhelming burden of choice and our modern obsession with certainty.
Right, and the book anchors this whole idea in the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden.
Which is a story everyone kind of thinks they know, right?
Yeah, culturally, it's often treated as just a simple shorthand for, the first mistake.
Yeah.
But look closer at what this narrative reveals about the architecture of human agency.
Okay, yeah.
It illustrates the raw, terrifying power of choice. One decision, yielding to temptation by the serpent, introduces fracture into their reality.
Wow. Yeah.
But it fundamentally establishes that humans have the profound freedom to choose their path.
And I mean, every single day we face micro versions of that exact choice, right? Truth versus compromise, integrity versus convenience.
Precisely.
But what really stands out in the text is the aftermath. Even after this monumental failure, the narrative portrays a God who doesn't abandon them. He still offers grace and redemption.
Which is huge. It frames failure not as a permanent disqualification, but as the very condition that grace actually responds to.
Right. And that concept of agency, it flows directly into how we handle the future. Because once you realize you have choices, you become completely paralyzed by the need to know the outcome of those choices.
Oh, absolutely. The fog of the future. And the author brings in the story of Abraham to illustrate this friction.
Right, Abraham.
Yeah, Abraham is commanded to leave his homeland and travel to a completely unknown destination.
I mean, talk about the ultimate lack of a GPS. Right?
Literally no map.
I look at Abraham's journey and I immediately think of modern analysis paralysis. We refuse to make a career change or a major life move without a guaranteed color-coded 10-year plan.
We want the itinerary, the travel insurance.
Yes, and the Yelp reviews of the destination before we even pack a single bag.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is how the narrative dismantles our modern illusion of control. Because we think if we just gather enough data, we can eliminate risk entirely.
Which is never true.
No, never. The author frames faith not as blind ignorance, but as the active antidote to our demand for absolute guarantees. Trusting, in this context, means moving forward when the data runs out.
Right, relying on being guided one step at a time rather than having the whole map. But taking that step without the map often makes you look ridiculous to everyone else.
Oh, for sure.
Take Noah. He's asked to build this enormous ark with absolutely no sign of rain on the horizon. The account highlights that he faces relentless mockery from a completely skeptical world.
Yeah, people literally laughing at him.
But I have a pushback here. The text uses this to say following God or following your convictions can feel lonely. But isn't it incredibly isolating to be the Noah in a modern workplace?
How do you mean?
Choosing deeply unpopular integrity when everyone else around you is openly compromising? That sounds completely exhausting.
Well, the author absolutely acknowledges that exhaustion. They don't sugarcoat the isolation at all. Noah's obedience in the face of mockery operates as a blueprint for surviving cultural storms.
Okay.
Psychologically, what we're talking about here is building an internal locus of control. The ark he builds is metaphorical for the integrity you construct when no one else understands your process.
Oh, I see.
So when the crisis finally hits, when the metaphorical rain falls, and the company faces a scandal or a layoff, that unpopular integrity is the very thing that keeps you afloat, internal conviction ultimately outweighs external validation.
Wow. Okay, so if Noah shows us how to endure the isolation of our own choices,
Huh.
how do we handle the hardships that we don't choose, the external disasters completely forced upon us?
That's the pivot into the architecture of adversity.
Right. How does the source reframe suffering, betrayal, and feelings of utter inadequacy? Because, I mean, look at Joseph.
Yeah, Joseph's narrative is presented as a masterclass in reframing trauma. He's betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, and unjustly imprisoned for years.
It's just terrible.
It really is a cascading series of absolute worst-case scenarios, none of which he actually provoked.
Joseph's life honestly looks like the most disastrous career resume imaginable. It's just a timeline of unfair setbacks, demoted, betrayed, imprisoned.
Right.
But then you get to the very last bullet point on that resume, and it reveals that every single disaster was actually preparation for a massive calling. He ends up saving countless lives in Egypt.
Exactly. And the key quote pulled from him is, "What you meant for evil, God meant for good."
That's powerful.
It is the crux of the argument regarding pain. The concept here closely mirrors narrative psychology. You know, the way we construct our identities based on the stories we tell ourselves about our past.
Right, how we frame it.
The author asserts that a divine perspective works behind the scenes, allowing you to retroactively make meaning out of trauma. It doesn't mean the betrayal didn't hurt.
Of course not.
It means the betrayal isn't the end of the sentence. It transforms a wound into a profound purpose.
And inadequacy gets a similar treatment through Moses, right?
Yeah.
Here's a guy called to lead a massive liberation movement. And his immediate response is basically, I can't do this. I'm a terrible public speaker.
Yeah, he feels completely unqualified.
And the response he gets isn't some modern motivational speech saying, no, you're actually a great speaker, believe in yourself. Instead, God simply equips him and says, I will be with you.
Which proves that vulnerability and weakness are just a stage for strength.
Right. But I have to ask you about the ultimate example of suffering presented here, Job.
Ah, Job, yeah.
Job loses his wealth, his children, his health. He is in absolute visceral agony. How does the text reconcile Job's profound grief with this idea of growth so it doesn't just sound like, a toxic modern self-help cliche?
It's a really vital distinction.
Okay.
A modern self-help cliche demands toxic positivity, right? The relentless pressure to immediately find the silver lining and just smile through the pain.
Exactly. Good vibes only.
Right. But the narrative does the exact opposite with Job. It actively validates his despair. The text doesn't gloss over the pain. Job asks incredibly difficult, angry questions. He screams into the void.
Yeah.
The growth being described isn't about slapping a happy face on a tragedy. This is about distress tolerance. The profound takeaway is that faith means trusting in the pitch black, even when you have absolutely no answers and no silver linings.
Wow.
Suffering is framed not as a puzzle to be solved or a punishment to be fixed, but as a mystery to be endured with grit.
That is a heavy but strangely comforting perspective.
It really is.
But if sitting in the dark is one kind of endurance, how do we handle the moments we actually have to fight back?
Right, the pivot to action.
Yeah. We shift from enduring hardship to actively confronting modern challenges. There's a massive difference between having actionable wisdom to fight those battles versus just drowning in information overload. Enter David and Goliath.
David is such a great example. A shepherd boy who steps onto a battlefield and sees an opportunity for God to move, where an entire trained army only saw an impossible, terrifying physical enemy.
Right.
And the author explicitly maps Goliath onto our modern giants.
Which is really striking. The modern giants listed are debt, chronic illness, anxiety, broken relationships.
Yeah.
We obviously don't have 9-foot-tall warriors challenging us to physical combat today, but aren't our modern giants actually harder to face than David's Goliath precisely because they are invisible?
That's a great point.
Like Goliath was a single physical entity. You knew exactly where he stood on the battlefield. Anxiety or chronic debt. That's an invisible ambient pressure that never leaves the room, which takes a massive cognitive toll.
Exactly. And that chronic, invisible nature is exactly why we need something deeper than just a tactical strategy to defeat them. A visible physical threat triggers a temporary fight or flight response.
Right.
But invisible threats like debt cause chronic allostatic load, long-term wear and tear on the body and mind.
Right, just grinds you down.
The narrative suggests that overcoming these modern giants requires faith, not just willpower. The seemingly insurmountable giant in front of you might actually be the specific catalyst required to reveal hidden resilience in your life.
Okay, I see.
But to recognize an obstacle as an opportunity, you need a very specific tool, which is wisdom.
Yes, look at Solomon. When given a blank check by God, Solomon didn't ask for wealth or power, he asked for wisdom.
Which is huge.
Today, we walk around with the entire internet in our pockets, a literal ocean of endless information. Yet the source argues we are completely starving for Solomon's wisdom.
Yes.
Because information tells you the exact compound interest of your debt, but wisdom teaches you how to actually live, speak, choose, and love your way through the stress of it.
Well said. If we connect this to the bigger picture, that concept of wisdom ties directly into the story of Esther.
Oh, Esther, let's talk about her.
She was an ordinary woman who found herself in a position of unexpected royal influence. And her uncle Mordecai told her she was placed there for such a time as this. Right.
The interpretation here is that everyone is born into their specific generation with their specific skills for a unique reason. Going back to Solomon, wisdom is the framework that allows you to recognize when you are actually in your Esther moment.
I love that phrasing.
It's the clarity to know when it is time to step into your purpose and actually use your influence.
Your Esther moment. But, applying that wisdom and facing those invisible giants, it requires a support system. You cannot do it alone.
No, definitely not.
And you absolutely cannot do it by just conforming to the crowd. That requires countercultural living, which brings us to the antidote to modern isolation.
Right, and the primary archetype used for this countercultural stance is Daniel.
Yeah.
Daniel lived in a Babylonian culture that diametrically opposed his faith and values. Yet the narrative shows him refusing to compromise his daily routines, his prayer, and his character.
It operates as a proof of concept that internal character matters way more than popularity.
Okay, so let's map that pressure directly to today. How does Daniel's standing firm in Babylon map onto today's relentless social media echo chambers?
This is the real question.
Because in Babylon, popularity was about currying favor in a royal court. Today, popularity is literally quantified. It is a metric of likes, retweets, and follower counts. Conformity isn't just encouraged, it's heavily rewarded by the algorithm.
This raises an important question about what we actually allow to shape our identity. Society continually pressures individuals to conform to shifting cultural algorithms.
Always.
Daniel's refusal to bend serves as a template for maintaining a core identity independent of those metrics. The argument is that external pressures eventually break down, but internal character endures.
And Mary is highlighted in this countercultural light as well, right?
Yes.
When told she would bear Jesus, her response was simply, "Let it be to me according to your word."
Which is incredible surrender.
In a modern culture, completely obsessed with controlling every variable, optimizing every morning routine and aggressively curating our lives, saying, "Let it be," is a radical act of surrender.
Oh, completely.
It's trusting that yielding control allows for extraordinary things, even if the plan completely disrupts your curated life.
And all of these archetypes, they culminate in the presentation of Jesus Christ as the ultimate example of countercultural living.
Right.
In an empire obsessed with dominance and military power, Jesus arrives as a servant. He heals, forgives, and ultimately gives his life on the cross.
Yeah.
The resurrection is framed as proof that love is fundamentally stronger than death, offering peace in the midst of all our modern chaos.
But the narrative doesn't stop with Jesus, though. It immediately examines what his followers did next, the early church.
Yes, the early believers.
They spread the gospel despite massive persecution. They shared resources, prayed together, and constantly encouraged one another. They essentially built the ultimate ancient group chat or mutual aid network. Sociologically speaking, the early church functioned as a robust third space, a community outside of the home and the workplace.
Right, which we lack so much today.
We really do. The author positions this shared faith and fierce accountability as the direct cure for the intense isolation of modern life. Humans are wired for community.
Yeah.
We require that deep fellowship to remain resilient against the exact pressures to conform that we just discussed with Daniel.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. We can take every single archetype we just discussed and overlay them directly onto your specific daily routines.
Yeah, taking it from the theoretical to the practical.
Exactly. The text provides a literal blueprint for modern life, proving its ultimate thesis that these aren't just old stories to be read in a dusty library, but highly practical tools.
It breaks down into incredibly relatable categories, starting with work and finances. By pointing to Joseph, Daniel, and the Apostle Paul, the author notes how they served with excellence.
The implication is that working with integrity transforms a mundane job into an act of worship. And regarding finances, it encourages generosity and wise stewardship.
Yes, explicitly framing money as a tool, not a master.
Exactly.
I want to look closely at the mental health aspect here, though. The material points to King David pouring out his raw, unfiltered emotions in the Psalms.
Yeah.
Is the text suggesting that ancient prayer was actually a form of acknowledging and psychologically processing anxiety rather than just suppressing it?
Yes, absolutely. Consider the psychological mechanism at play here, a concept called affect labeling.
Okay.
Neuroscience shows that simply putting your feelings into words reduces activation in the amygdala, your brain's fear center.
Oh, wow.
The author validates the modern need to process complex emotions by showing that ancient heroes did exactly this. David wasn't suppressing his fear, he was bringing it to God. Prayer is presented as a profound way to process anxieties rather than letting them fester.
That makes so much sense. And it applies the same blueprint to family and relationships, arguing they have to be built on humility, grace, and forgiveness to restore unity.
Right.
And it circles right back to where we started with uncertainty, reminding us that just like Abraham leaving his home, or Moses facing the Red Sea, or Esther walking into the royal court, we can trust the process without knowing the final outcome.
The overarching takeaway of this entire analysis is a message of permanence. Civilizations rise and fall. Tech rises. But the author argues that God remains entirely the same.
Yeah.
The assertion is that the exact same God who parted the Red Sea and gave David courage is actively working today.
That idea is anchored with a verse from Hebrews 13:8. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever.
Like a powerful statement of permanence.
It really is. In an incredibly fast-moving world where the rules seem to change every week, the material speaks directly to you, the listener, offering this encouragement. Even if you feel entirely ordinary right now, your struggles are not wasted. Your life has profound meaning, and God sees you.
It's a reminder that historical shifts often hinge on ordinary people, people who feel just as inadequate as Moses. The final encouragement is to let your life become integrated into a much larger eternal story.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive talking about that strange modern paradox holding a smartphone while wrestling with ancient dread.
Right.
The material we've explored today suggests that the cure for that dread isn't going to come in the next software update. It comes from tapping into the unchanging truths of human nature and divine grace.
It challenges us to look past the technology of our era and recognize the timeless realities operating underneath.
I want to leave you with a thought to mull over, building on that final encouragement. We just spent this time analyzing the struggles and faithful choices of ordinary ancient individuals like Esther, Noah, and Daniel.
Yeah.
We are reading about their decisions thousands of years later to help guide us today. So consider this: how might the seemingly mundane, quiet choices of integrity you are making right now invisibly ripple out to shape the lives of people generations from now?
That's a great question.
What kind of ancient truth are you writing for the future? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.